players given the state of the franchise, I didn't think they could do any better than Ron Rivera. And look, to get Ron Rivera, Snyder had to give up, both the head coaching position and the general manager position. I'll still contend, by the way, to this very day, and I know this pisses some of you off, I'll still contend to this very day that his coaching here was not terrible. Wearing two hats as the coach and the GM was not good for him. It was not good for the franchise. He was a terrible general manager. That's just a fact. He was bad at evaluating talent. He was bad at acquiring talent. Just a horrendous general manager. And the franchise is paid for a lot of those mistakes. As a head coach, though, I actually think some of his teams played some pretty good football. The 2020 team late that year, I know they won the division with a 7-9 record, but that team got better and improved as the season went along, certainly when Alex Smith became available. And that team, by the way, the 2020 team and even that 2021 team, after bad starts, improved. The 2021 team, for a stretch before the COVID bug hit that team late in the season, they were 6-6 and had won 4 in a row, I think it was, and were exactly what Ron Rivera teams were. They were physical, they were disciplined, and then they got hit by the COVID bug, at the worst possible time, entering December, and you had guys starting games that had no business starting games. The 2022 team, look, they were 2 games over 500 and solidly in the playoff mix. I think they were a 6 seed, entering and getting into mid-December. And then they lost they tied the Giant game, lost the Giant game at home, controversial finish. And then the Cleveland game, when he decided to go back to Wentz, that was obviously not the right call. And then he didn't know at the end of that game that they could be eliminated, which was pretty bad. But, the 2023 was one of the worst teams in franchise history. But remember, he was coaching as a lame duck coach with new ownership. He knew he was not going to be back in 2024. That team was terrible. But I actually thought that in stretches, he was not a terrible head coach, and the teams kind of overachieved based on the talent that they had that, by the way, he was acquiring as a terrible GM. And yes, PW91, I remember thinking that Scott Turner was better than most of you thought he was. That's true. If you want to call that sycophantish, I don't know why you would. It's not like I had any real feelings for Scott Turner when he got hired. I just didn't think he was terrible. I mean, I thought the quarterbacks were terrible. I thought the talent was terrible. And I thought he got a lot more out of what he, should have gotten. But, whatever. Bottom line is Ron wore 2 hats and he was terrible wearing one of them, the GM hat, period. And, the other thing about Rivera, and I think you have to say it when we think back about the Rivera era, he arrives in 2020, COVID hits, the organization's in turmoil, the team loses its name. That was 6 years ago this week, by the way, that the team gave up the name after Fred Smith and Federal Express put the pressure on. Remember, he felt pressure from Snyder in taking the dual role job to at least give Haskins a chance, probably despite his better judgment. And then on top of that, he gets cancer. He gets cancer in the summer of 2020, entering that first year. And nobody in that organization other than him was capable of speaking for the organization. Snyder was under investigation after investigation, dealing with congressional pressure, etc., losing the team name. Not to mention, he hated being in front of a microphone. They hired Jason Wright, disaster hire. I think most of you know this by now, that Jason Wright was not exactly the most popular guy in that building when he was there, and he and Ron butted heads. He wanted to be more involved in football, which really would have been a joke. That was a disaster hire, and everybody in town that had any contact with what was going on knew it from the jump. Ron did not enter a healthy situation in his defense, and then he himself got sick. But overall, he was not good here, and I supported the hiring of him. I did. I thought that maybe it would work out. I'm not sure anybody else would have succeeded. They could have hired anybody in this, in January of 2020 with what was coming and the state the organization was in. It was not going to be pretty for anybody. Look, no one succeeded with Dan Snyder as the owner. And Ron certainly did not succeed. But yeah, I was supportive of the hire at the start. I thought I called fair shots as the situation evolved. I crushed him for a lot of in-game decisions. I didn't like the way he handled some things publicly. With that said, he was the guy on the spot because nobody else could be that guy until Jason Wright decided he wanted to interject himself into a lot of the stuff. Yeah. I was PW 91. I was a big fan of Mark Turgeon as a coach. He was a good basketball coach, a really good basketball coach, and other coaches will tell you that. But he didn't get enough done in the month of March, and that's why ultimately it ended for him, even though his best team, his 2020 team, certainly would have made a deep run, and they didn't get that chance because of COVID. But Mark Turgeon, won a lot of basketball games in the regular season, which does count to a certain degree. He won more games except for Izzo and Painter in the Big Ten when he was there. Anyway, I don't know. Sycophant, maybe, with some. Definitely the Shanahan. I mean, I was a big fan of Mike's, and I was a big fan of the staff. I was a big fan of Kyle when people were screaming nepotism. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I went overboard or not, but I was definitely, and still to this day, huge fan of the Shanahans and everything that he brought to town when he got here in 2010. All right, up next, Mitch Tischler will join me. We'll talk some football with Mitch. Mitch, of course, with Monumental Sportsnet and the JP Finley podcast. This is the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the Team980.com. This segment of the show is brought to you by Window Nation. If you need new windows, I highly recommend giving Window Nation a call, 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. Right now, 50% off everything, all window styles. And you don't have to pay anything for 2 years. No monthly payments, no down payment, no interest charge for 2 full years. They've got over 45,000 five-star reviews on social media. They were rated number 1 by Forbes magazine among all window installation companies across America. I promise you, if you are in need of new windows, reach out to them, mention my name. They'll schedule a fast, free in-home estimate. You'll find out which windows actually need to be replaced once they come out and give you that estimate. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com. All right, joining me right now is Mitch Tischler. Mitch, of course, works for Monumental Sportsnet, covers the team, is a big part of JP Finley's Beltway Football podcast, which you can get wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow Mitch on X at Mitch_Tischler. I feel like when I have you on, we end up talking about other things that have nothing to do with the football team. And I'm going to start with that because I was just scrolling through some of your recent tweets, and it looks like you and JP maybe started to discuss how to define the DMV, like actually who lives in the DMV. And you tweeted out, if you live in the district or a county that touches DC, you're in the DMV, otherwise not. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a second. This was a debate, I want to say 10 years ago. I think I was doing this show with Cooley, and Zabe and I got into an argument, I think, in the bullpen about what makes up the DMV. And I had said basically to Cooley and Zabin, you guys live so far away from D.C. because Cooley lived out in Leesburg. Zabe lives out even further. You guys are closer to West Virginia than you are D.C. You don't live in the DMV. I'm sorry. And I basically went through what I considered to be the DMV, and I expand it from where you say it is. So you really believe that if you don't live in the district or in Montgomery County, PG County, or Arlington and Alexandria County, you're not a DMVer?
Yeah, I got a little bit narrow on the definition of it. The thing is, it's not a defined space. And it's funny because this argument started between JP, myself, and one of our other coworkers who lives down in Waldorf, Maryland,
right,
who claims that he's part of the DMV.
No.
And I kind of politely tried to tell him it wasn't. A day later, Barstool DMV tweeted out this concentric circle thing graphic on Twitter. And part of that graphic had Baltimore as part of the DMV based on, distances or whatever. And I think that the DMV is bigger than just the counties that touch the actual district, but it certainly doesn't go up to Baltimore. I don't think it goes as far west as Leesburg or Ashburn, or as far south as maybe Fredericksburg, which is I think where JP drew the southern line of it. I think that folks want to be associated with the DMV, which I love as a native, as a person from Montgomery County and somebody who considers themselves from the DMV. But as the defined neighborhoods kind of expand and meld together, and it's a little bit harder to define where Ruston is versus Herndon, or Rockville versus Bethesda, or Columbia versus whatever the heck is up around there. I think it gets harder and harder to define it. But I think that if you're in one of the counties that touches it, it's an absolute that you are part of the DMV. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Well, yeah, that's a given. Do you remember when Bill Walton was trying to explain the DMV, the late, great Bill Walton, and he basically said, and I may butcher this, but I think I have it right. He said the DMV is Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. He said Delaware. I think that's what he said, if I recall correctly. It's kind of interesting, Mitch, and you're younger than I am. The DMV description was not a description 25 years ago, I would guess. It was also we all always referred to it as, the DC metro area or just DC. Like when I'm traveling and somebody says, "Where are you from?" I say Washington, D.C. I actually live in D.C., but for many years I lived in Maryland. But I'll always say Washington, D.C. The DMV acronym didn't become popular, I don't think, until maybe 20 years ago, maybe even more recently than that. Have you been alive long enough to know that the DMV description is relatively new?
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up in the 80s, late 80s, 90s, so I certainly was around before, quote unquote, DMV. And I'm the same as you. I say I'm from Washington, D.C. when someone asks me where I'm from. And then if they try and, drill down on it, I'll get into the specifics of it. I'd be curious of kind of the etymology of it. To me, it started with for me, college basketball recruiting. As we started talking about all the players in the DMV, in the district area that started going elsewhere, and folks would say, well, he's from Virginia, he's not from D.C. And it was like, or he's from Maryland, not from D.C. And I'm like, yeah, but it's all, that area, this small little area of, call it a 20-mile circle between, the northern part of D.C., southern, east, west, is all kind of one, different states and different districts, but it's all kind of one area. And so when I was, rooting for the Terps growing up and going to games, and as the big names started leaving the area, and folks would argue whether, why did that guy go to Maryland? It was like, well, he's from Virginia, so why would he? But it's all kind of one area. So to me, that's where it kind of started, was kind of those mid 90s, late 90s, maybe even early 2000s, probably more early 2000s teams, as some of those big time players started leaving.
Yeah, I mean, our closeness to sports would lead us into that answer. But I actually, when you said it, I think some of the early days of hearing DMV had to do with what you just said. And that is the recruitment of basketball players in this area. We're probably wrong about that, but that actually is interesting. I'll tell you what we are not and have never been, and that is, the greater capital region or anything with, of course, we live in the nation's capital, but the nation's capital's never been a part of the local description of where we live. It was DC Metro or just DC, and now it's DMV. By the way, so if I recall, the way I kind of defined it when we were having this conversation many years ago in what we used to call our bullpen area, which was outside the main studio at 980 when our offices and studios were in Rockville, I basically said, look, I mean, you take everything in and around DC, the obvious, Montgomery, PG, Arlington County, Falls Church, Alexandria is a county, I believe. Fairfax doesn't touch D.C., but Fairfax, to me, is definitely part of the DMV. I also think that Frederick is a part of the DMV. Maybe you cut Frederick in half, the county, but, a lot of Frederick is a part of the DMV. And then to me, when you got out to beyond Dulles Airport, and you're talking about Western Loudoun County, Fauquier County. I remember, I don't know my Virginia counties. Let me just be honest about that. I was like, you're closer to West Virginia than you are downtown DC. I mean, it's interesting, the football team's players and coaches have always lived so far away from the true DC metro, close in areas that they didn't get to experience it. Cooley and I used to have this conversation all the time. He never came into DC. Players never came into DC. They lived in their world at one Loudoun and in Loudoun County, and they thought they were living in DC. And I'd say, no, you're not living in DC. The people that are going to your games are from areas much closer to a big city that you're not actually familiar with. But, the Capitals and the Wizards players and the Nationals players, they've always obviously lived close to where they work. So they've lived in and around close in D.C., whether it was D.C. itself or the close-in Maryland or Virginia suburbs. But I think I think I basically said it's everything, including Fairfax and some of the counties. I think maybe I threw in a couple of the Maryland counties, like maybe Charles and half of Howard, and half of Loudoun and half of Frederick, something like that. I mean, I may be. You've limited it to a much smaller size than I would have limited it to, and did limit it to when I had this conversation years ago.
Yeah. So growing up in Maryland, I feel more strongly about some of the Maryland takes I have on it versus the Virginia ones.
Sure.
And the one that I think that for you, talking about Frederick is closer to West Virginia than it is downtown D.C. I mean, you get
sure. Harper's Ferry, of course, yes,
right there. I don't think it extends west of the end of Montgomery County. I think even at that point, we're getting a little out there with the northern western portion of Montgomery County. But this is something that you and I and folks from this area, whether you're from here or lived here for a long time, could argue in circles about forever.
Yeah.
In case our good friend Daryl Johnson is listening. Do you agree with me that Waldorf is not a part of the deal?
Yes. I mean, look, I know that when we get east of this city into the Maryland counties, going all the way down to to Ocean City and Salisbury, I know that there are a lot of Skins fans and DC sports fans there, but that's not part of the DMV. And when I hear people from outside the DMV try to put Baltimore into it, then it's not only that they're not from here, I don't think they've ever been here before. As you and I both know, Baltimore and Washington are two completely distinct and separate cities and surrounding areas. We do share, a love, D.C., Maryland, anyway, with Baltimore of Maryland sports teams. And there is a dividing line somewhere in Howard County, somewhere in Frederick County, maybe. But no, Baltimore is not, there's nothing about Baltimore that is D.C. and vice versa.
I hope you don't have too many listeners out in Baltimore, but Baltimore is DC's little brother. We kind of tap them on the head and say, "Yeah, you guys are great out there. It's all good." There's a solid rivalry between the two, and I think that the bigger point, I had a lot of people coming at me on Twitter talking about like, "Well, I'm a Commanders fan, Skins fan that lives down in Blacksburg or whatever." Fandom doesn't have a defined border. You can root for this team from anywhere.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Rooting for the Commanders, rooting for the Skins, and living quote unquote outside of the DMV is totally okay, and everyone is welcome on board. There's no border to this thing.
Yeah, none whatsoever. All right, enough of that. Let's start with what the conversation's been about for at least a month and a half, maybe a bit longer, and that is the perceived need for adding to the wide receiver room. Where are you on what will happen? What will it look like when we get to the opener September 13th against Philadelphia? What will the wide receiver room look like?
I personally don't think they're going to bring anybody else in. I think the group that they have is the group that they're rolling with. And I do think that they've done a decent job of raising the floor of the wide receiver room with guys like Diami and Van Jefferson coming in. I think you look at, how devastated this group was last year and some of the names that they had to trot out there. And quite frankly, they're fine practice squad players. They're fine emergency players, but they were getting far too much run time for a team that had, real expectations, at least running into the year. I think at this point, there are some names out there, obviously the Steph Diggs of the world, and that's that group that I think folks get excited because you hear the names. But ultimately, anyone that they do bring in at this point, I think is a bonus, and I don't think you should really expect that they're going to come in and have a really big role. I do think that a bunch of these guys are going to be available in case a guy like Treylon Burks does end up getting hurt, and you have to bring in a vet. And I think that you can look at the DeAndre Hopkins of the world and think, I don't know that he's going to be on a roster to start the season. I guess we'll see here in the next couple of weeks. But ultimately, I think the Terry McLaurin, Treylon Burks, and Antonio Williams trio as kind of your top three is going to be, the group that is going to be on the field the first time they go three wide this season. And quite frankly, I think if they really felt like they had to make a major move, otherwise it wouldn't be a late July move. It would have been a move, during free agency, or they would have maybe been a little more aggressive during the draft time. So, we saw Jaden Daniels run this offense incredibly efficiently with arguably a worse set of receivers 2 seasons ago when they made it to the NFC Championship game. Ultimately, the success of this offense is going to come down to Jaden Daniels, which obviously with most NFL teams does boil down to the quarterback. But I don't think this receiver core is a detriment to the success of this team.
I'll come back to your description of or your comparison of 2 years ago to what maybe they have right now. But were you? I had Keim on yesterday, and I've everybody that's listening knows how I've felt all along the way on the Brandon Ayuk thing. Just FYI, 6 weeks ago, I thought it was a given that he would be on this roster by the beginning of the season. And now I think the chances are slim and none, even though there's, you never say never. He might be able to repair his image. Who knows? But I think I think that train has left the station. But did you think, like I did and like Keim did and maybe others 5-6 weeks ago, that there was a pretty good chance that Brandon Ayuk was going to be on the roster?
It certainly felt like the momentum was going there. Honestly, from the beginning, and I feel a little vindicated about it now, I said that I am interested in bringing him in, but I'm interested in bringing him in to meet with Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and find out, where his head's at and where his game's at and where his health is at. I didn't think it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to sign, because I think there were real questions both with his health, which honestly, as much as you want to point back to some pregame workout video from, almost a year ago, 10 months ago, versus, how much work has he actually been putting in? How much work has he been doing? I'm not saying he has or he hasn't. We just don't know because we haven't seen it. At least with Stephon Diggs, he's posting the workout videos and showing that he's in shape and showing that he's, working out and working his way back. It's been a long time since Brandon Ayuk has played football in the NFL. And you take all the off the field stuff, and push that aside for 1 second to evaluate whether, his leg, his knee, his ankle are in good shape, ready to go, and he's going to be able to step out and be the football player that we saw, basically 2 years ago. And then you pile on top of that everything that happened, in San Francisco, I think warranted at minimum a conversation with the guy to find out, was it in his mind, was it warranted, or was he just kind of being a diva type receiver? And I don't think that there has really been, any sort of conclusion to that. The social media antics have been what they are. Aside from the little barbs back and forth between him and Jaden, I don't think that anything that he's done on social has pushed it to a point where he's unsignable. Certainly, I need to have that conversation with him. I need to have a conversation with Jaden to see, what his thoughts are on all of it. But I think that, if he becomes available, and honestly, from the beginning, that was kind of my biggest point, was if he was ever going to become available, because he seems so hard set on not doing anything with San Francisco. And if he's not going to engage with the 49ers, obviously they have no incentive to get rid of him. So I always thought that it felt like the momentum was pushing there, but I don't think I was ever declarative that he was or he wasn't going to be here.
Yeah. What's interesting about what you said is that, yes, I actually think a lot of what he's done on social media becomes problematic because it makes it a much more polarizing, signing if you get to it after kicking the tires, and you've got to have the stomach for it. But I think much more importantly than anything that's happened on social media is his lack of action, his lack of seriousness. And that's an indicator and something that I'm not saying. I don't think anytime somebody has talent, there's very little that they can do to disqualify themselves. We've seen that over the years. But the fact that he has not taken any action to actually affect the impact that he has claimed to desire would be a big problem. You went back to 24 and you said maybe this is even, that 24 may have been worse than what they have now. I'm not saying that you're wrong, and I don't disagree with you. Time will tell. I don't really know one way or the other if that'll play out that way. But the one thing that I think gets overlooked, and I'm curious as to what you think, is in going back and looking at 24, you had a Terry McLaurin who was 2 years younger. This is now Terry McLaurin 2 years older. I'm not saying that there will be a big difference between 26 and 24. He was great in 24. I actually think the odds favor he'll be in the best shape of his life. He's such a pro, and he'll have a really good year as long as he's healthy and the quarterback's healthy. But they had Eckler. They had a big red zone target in Ertz. Noah Brown, actually, when he was out there, was effective and a favorite of Jaden's. So I'm not so convinced yet that 26's supporting cast as is equal to or better than 24's. You think what?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with you. I think Terry is a similar player today that he was 2 years ago. Obviously, we saw last year for the first time in his career, real health concerns. So maybe there's a little bit more of a concern there. But I think Chigakonko is a more dynamic version of Zach Ertz. Obviously, Zach has a ton of, veteran savvy in his game, but I think Chig is a much more explosive player than Zach is. I think he gives an offense so much more in the middle of the field. And then you look at speaking strictly of the pass catching room, Olamide Zaccheaus, Noah Brown, De'Ami Brown, Luke was a rookie that year. I just think I look at this group and it's a little bit more of an established group behind them. I'm high on Treylon Burks, but I think Treylon Burks and Noah Brown are semi-similar in their general inability to stay healthy. I just think Treylon is a better receiver than Noah was. And I'm intrigued with Antonio Williams. I certainly would rather have a rookie Antonio Williams than journeyman Olamide Zaccheaus there. And De'Ami and Van Jefferson on the back end of the room, I think, give you, similar to what De'Ami gave you 2 years ago. They give you a dynamic downfield threat, from either or both of them. Luke McCaffrey is, more mature. He was a rookie in 24. He hadn't really ever played receiver. He's at least grown a little bit. And I think that Luke can be a really nice piece to an offense. I think having to rely on him like they did at times last year was probably a step too much for Luke at this point in his growth and maturation as a true wide receiver. I think that he gives you, a little bit of size and certainly some nice downfield options in certain spots. And Jalen Lane is, I would say your, kind of other guy in the group. But ultimately, I think that the group of pass catchers, I don't think that Austin Eckler is so much better than what Rachaad White is going to give you out of the backfield catching the football. So I think those two can, kind of be a wash there. I like this group a little bit more because I think it's similar to the group they had in 24, just a little bit more seasoned and there are a couple of small upgrades along the way.
I hope you're right, and I think there's a chance you will be right. And we'll see how it plays out. But it sounds to me like you think there's a good chance that it's Terry and Burks with Antonio Williams as kind of the slot, and those are your first three receivers when they first go 11 personnel.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I think they're going to move these guys around a fair amount, which
sure.
We've seen during camp and OTAs. But if you were to line up in a traditional Madden 11 set, yes, that's kind of how I foresee it.
Let's flip it to the defensive side of the ball. This is a completely different roster defensively with a different coordinator defensively. We don't know how it'll play out, the chemistry, the fit, the scheme, the whole thing, but it can't be worse than it was last year. I don't even think it can be worse than it was in 24. What are your expectations, here on July 15th of what this defense can do in 2026?
To me, it starts schematically. I think those Joe Witt defenses were far too passive and far too easy to diagnose. And I think that's the biggest difference that Durante Jones is going to bring to the group. both the aggressiveness and getting after the quarterback in a lot of different looks, a lot of different fronts. We talked to Nick Allegretti during camp, and he talked about how good it was for him and for Jaden in terms of trying to work on their discussion, because the defense, even in minicamp and OTAs, were giving them so many different looks, and guys were coming from so many different positions that it gave kind of the offense and offensive line a really good feel for kind of what game days are going to look like. And to me, if you're able to kind of start implementing some of that stuff, this early in the process, I think that shows you just how different everything is going to be. I think it's going to be an interesting group to watch, because ultimately I think they might give up some big plays because they're going to be bringing so much pressure. But at the same time, I think they're going to create more turnovers or create more opportunities for turnovers, because they're going to force quarterbacks into making quick decisions. And to me, that's just such a fundamental change from what we saw the last 2 years, where, these guys would come out in their defensive sets and there was communication at the line of scrimmage as the ball was being snapped. So clearly what the coaches were trying to teach the players wasn't sticking, or they weren't cohesive in terms of understanding what checks they were supposed to make. I expect to see a big difference in that. And then secondly, I think you're going to see a lot of, fake looks. You're going to see a lot of safeties kind of creeping up the line and dropping into deep coverage, or vice versa. Corners coming from different angles. I think that front seven is going to be so dynamic in terms of getting after the ball. I think the linebacking group year over year, last year to this year, might be one of the single most improved individual positions of any team in the NFL, particularly when you look at the speed and athleticism that Sonny Styles and Leo Chenal are going to bring to the table. Not to mention, I think finally getting Frankie Luvu back into a true linebacking position, which is where we saw him play well, 2 years ago, his first year in Washington. Last year, they asked him to put his hand in the dirt and be a defensive end far too often, and that's just not what he excels at. So I do expect to see a much more aggressive defense. I think they're going to be much quicker. I think, knock on wood, God willing, they're going to be better tackling. And you're going to see.
Well, they certainly sign better tacklers, and certainly on the back end with somebody like Nick Cross for sure. This is such a training camp question, but we're 2 weeks away. But give me right now who leads the team in sacks and how many.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to be hard pressed to not go with Odafe Oweh. How many sacks? Let's give him 12 and a half sacks. I think that both him and Kayvon Chason are going to have, really, really nice impacts in terms of getting to the quarterback. And we kind of forget about Dorrance Armstrong, because obviously he's coming back from the ugly injury. But if he's able to be back once we get to camp and kind of as we get into the season, I think you have a pretty dynamic group of pass rushers there. Not to mention Joshua Josephs, who's going to be, a back-end pass rusher. But in those, third and long situations, he is a big, big body. And one of the things during minicamp OTAs that I really liked was he has a really good bend getting around the corner, kind of sweeping that hand on the ground as he's trying to turn the corner on tackles. He could be a really nice piece too, in a secondary role.
All right, we'll finish up with this. Give me a player on both sides of the ball that isn't getting a lot of conversation, even in our circles. And it can be a player that maybe it was already on the roster. It doesn't have to be a new player that you think ends up having a much larger impact on the season than maybe we're anticipating right now.
I think offensively, for me, it's Rachaad White.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Conversations, but watching him at camp, he's much faster than I expected, much quicker than I expected. And quite frankly, I was a little kind of blown away the first time that we saw him. The first practices they did were inside the bubble, and watching him gain ground on linebackers was really impressive. I think you get the kind of veteran savvy of a guy who knows how to carry the ball between the tackles, but also has a little bit of that, burst on the edges where he can help you out a lot in the passing game. Not to mention he's one of the best pass blocking running backs in the league, so he's going to have a really nice role. Defensively, I've talked about this guy for a few years in a row now, so maybe at some point it's getting a little bit beyond. But I think Jordan McGee could be a really nice piece in the middle of this defense. I don't think he's going to be on the field for even 50% of the defensive snaps, but I do think that he is kind of the one kind of true traditional linebacker that you have on this roster in terms of size and downhill ability. Sonny Styles certainly plays into that role too, but he's a rookie, so I think there's going to be some growing pains a little bit in reading and stopping the run. But I think Jordan McGee, when he was given an opportunity last year, showed enough of the sideline to sideline speed and enough of the football instincts where he can really be, a really nice run stopping piece in the middle of that defense. I mean, honestly, I think of him kind of in, people are going to laugh, but a little bit in how Bobby Wagner was effective last year is in the role that I can see Jordan McGee being effective this year. Do I want to see him running with tight ends and running backs? Not as much, but on short yardage downs or most likely run downs, I really like the idea of Jordan McGee kind of in the middle of that defense being a monster that can go blow up a blocker and get to the running back, or just straight, get after the ball carrier.
Thanks for doing this, as always. Let's chat before the season begins. Thanks, Mitch.
Absolutely, anytime. And, if you want to argue about the DMV a little more, I'm happy to come back on and make my point.
This time of year, I think it's more interesting to most people who listen to this podcast. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thanks.
Mitch Tischler, everybody, from Monumental Sports and the JP Finley podcast. We learned something from these rankings on ESPN this week, position groups. We'll get to that coming up next hour and a lot more. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the team980.com. The Nats begin their post-All-Star break portion of the schedule. 65 games left in the regular season, a game below 500 as we speak. A woeful bullpen, but a prolific offense through their first 97 games. Yesterday on the show, I had Dave Jagler on. He is so good. He's so good in the booth with Charlie Slows. And he had a lot to say about the trade deadline coming up end of the month, first part of next month, and what the Nats may need to do over this next stretch to be more of a buyer than a standstiller or seller even. This is my conversation with Dave yesterday.
The 2-2. Swing, it's golfed in the air, straightaway center and deep. Grisham going back to the warning track near the wall. It's over his head. Over the wall, it's gone. It's a home run. A pinch hit, game-tying home run for Curtis Mead.
The smooth voice and call of one Dave Jagler, along with Charlie Slows, part of a longtime Nats radio booth. Dave is joining us right now. So before, Dave, we get to the season that we've seen so far, I'm going to ask you something that we did with callers off of the heels. Have you been following the World Cup at all? Have you been watching it?
Here and there. I mean, obviously, a lot of the games happen when I'm working, but I kind of know. I know what's going on. So
okay. So yesterday, the English lost a game in which essentially defeat was snagged from the jaws of victory. So for an hour plus, we took calls. It's All-Star week, by the way. That's the slowest week on the sports calendar. So we took calls for over an hour. The most gut-wrenching loss for you and your team, when victory seemed assured and then all of a sudden it wasn't. And there are several Nats games to pick from, but I'm wondering if something immediately pops to your mind.
Well, if you were talking this season, we have about 12 of them. But,
yes, true.
For all time, I'd say right away my mind went to Game 5, 2012, the first ever appearance in the postseason. They had a 6-0 lead and Gio Gonzalez on the mound in the fourth inning, and they had a 7-5 lead, one strike away from a win with Drew Storen on the mound. So that one immediately jumps to mind because that was the first time that they had been there. And of all four division series losses were crushing, but I think that one was the most because they were, again, one strike away from advancing, which we've seen the Nationals be one strike away from winning 3 times this year, and they've not won the game. Those were all against the Phillies over 2 different series. So that one to me jumps out right away.
100% for me too. And remember, the night before was Jason Worth's game-winning home run that forced that 5th and deciding game. I remember talking for a week after that game on radio, and as a born and raised Washingtonian and not having baseball for 33 years, it was one of those hurts, Dave, that I think sports fans have to suffer through before they can really appreciate when you actually get it done, which this team did in 2019. And this team had 3 Game 5 losses at home. Yep. That was the first one. The Dodgers came in here in 16 and won Game 5. And then the Cubs, obviously, after Strasburg's Game 4 gem at Wrigley, came in here and won Game 5. I think it was a nice sort of building of thick skin before you could really appreciate what happened in 2019.
No, we had plenty of scar tissue built up. There's no question, and we can't slight 2014, that team that stormed the regular season, won on the last day of the regular season with a Jordan Zimmerman no-hitter, and just kind of came out a little bit flat and lost a series to the wild card Giants that they probably never should have lost. And even though that one was only in 4 games, that one stung too, because of all the teams that didn't win, I think that might have been the best team that didn't win. 4 were knocked off in the division series.
I'll tell you what, in terms of attending a sporting event live, that Game 2, the 18-inning game, where the temperature, I think, went from 70 to like 40 during the course of that game. Do you remember how windy and cold it got by the end of that night? That was a devastating loss, and it was like 2 home games to open up that series. They just couldn't hit in that series, right? Other than Harper, if I remember correctly.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, Harper hit a bunch of homers, and the wind. You said the wind change. It dropped, precipitously, like 20-something degrees, and the wind knocked out a ball that Anthony Rendon hit that would have been a home run earlier in the game, in like the 14th or 15th inning. So It just felt like that game was never going to end. And it felt like 2 losses in one, even though it only counted as one. But once that happened, you kind of had a feeling it was not going to be their series.
Yeah, I mean, in their first 2 seasons as a playoff team as the Washington Nationals, there were memorable games. Game 4 and 5 against St. Louis, and obviously Game 2 against San Francisco in 2014. All right, so let's get to this team. They will open up the first of their, final 65 games. Tomorrow night you'll be there when they face the A's. So if they had just a normal bullpen, where do you think they'd be right now in the standings?
I think they'd be in wild card position. I don't know that they'd be in first place in front of the Braves, but they'd be in wild card position. We can run through the laundry list of games that haven't gone their way, that had late leads, but when you have the number 1 offense in baseball with just an average pitching staff, I mean, look where they would be. I mean, unfortunately, that's not been the case, but I give this team credit and kind of look at it as a glass half full, that after all these tough losses, the offense keeps coming back the next day and scoring more runs. So they're probably in a better position than what we thought they would be going into the season. But considering how it's played out, you're almost a little disappointed they are where they are, because it could.
Oops, did we lose Dave? I think we just lost him briefly. Try to get him back.
My house. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right. I got you now. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you kind of cut off when you said, look, 48 and 49, we'd probably all take it back in, late March, but here they are, and it could have been a lot better.
Yeah. And those are the games, the 3 games against the Phillies where they're 1 strike away, 9-1 against the Giants, 6-1 with the Dodgers leading late early in the season. I mean, there's a bunch of them. But I mean, honestly, they didn't. The bullpen wasn't an area that was addressed in the offseason. In fact, they traded away their top 2 relievers over the course of last season: Kyle Finnegan during last season and Jose Ferrer in the offseason. So obviously, this team has achieved more sooner than we thought. So I mean, if you're an optimist, glass half full, you feel good about the first half in that respect. We're watching one of the best single season offensive performances in Nationals history with what James Wood is doing, and an all-star first half from Abrams, and Foster Griffin, what a find he has been. So for the Nationals to have 3 all-stars was a tremendous first half.
If somebody hadn't been paying attention to the Nats 48 and 49 season, at the all-star break, is it as easy as just saying this is a really good baseball team with a terrible bullpen? Is that it? Is it that simple?
Well, I mean, you could boil it down to that. Now, are there things they could do better? Yes. I mean, defensively, they struggled. They still have committed the most errors in the major leagues, but they've played better as the season has gone along in that respect. I think the starting pitching, it's had at times some good things. I think, like we said, Foster Griffin, what a tremendous find that is. But credit to Blake Viterra and the coaching staff. You had Zach Littell and Miles Michaelis struggle right out of the gate. But, going to the opener strategy, which is something the Nationals have never done in their history, has kind of maximized what they've been able to give the team. And so the Littell games and the Michaelis games where they're getting openers, those are games they have a chance to win late in games. So I think that the whole process of the new front office, the new coaching staff, the new manager, I think that's something that has to be in the positive column this season. And I just like the versatility of this offense. They're right near the top of the league in home runs, but they're near the top of the league in stolen bases too.
Right.
So it makes it a fun offense to watch, and that they can beat you in a number of ways. So it's not just not to simply say it's a great record. There's a lot of things that have gone into making the record what it is.
So they sit here at 48 and 49. It was a shame what happened over the weekend. You mentioned the Phillies series. Get a couple of those back, and you're even closer than 4 games out from that final spot. And there are a lot of teams in contention for that final wild card spot. But what would you hope that they would be thinking in terms of their mindset approaching the trade deadline? Do you need to be somewhere in terms of games out from a spot to behave differently? How does that all get handled here at the end of this month?
Yeah, I think they could go a number of different ways, Kevin. I mean, this is a key road trip. You've got the A's who've dropped 9 in a row, and the Rockies who are at the bottom of the standings. So you've got to make some hay on this road trip, get back over 500, and then go into a homestand against Arizona and Toronto. Arizona's a contender in the National League. Toronto, last year's American League champion. And if you have a good 2 weeks, I think that that definitely could chart the course to this team trying to add to the bullpen. If they kind of tread water, I think that you could kind of see either way. You could see them buy and sell, or perhaps sell. And if they don't play well, I think then you'd see that they would sell. So I mean, it's totally up to these next 2 weeks. And so there are a number of different charts that you can courses you can chart depending on what they do. First over this road trip, then over the next homestand. So that's a hard question to answer right now. And I think Paul Taboni is open and waiting. Every time he's talked about it, he's kind of said, we'll wait and see where we are August 3rd. And obviously the next 2 to 2.5 weeks of baseball will tell us a lot.
That's an excellent point. Given these first 6 games out of the gate on the road against 2 teams struggling, these are the games that could really sort of drive that decision. What did you make of the Bob Nightingale USA Today report where he reported that the Nats were perhaps let everybody know that C.J. Abrams and James Wood were available during last winter for trade?
I mean, I don't really. Obviously, I think CJ. There was discussion a lot about CJ Abrams in the offseason.
Right.
The James Wood thing, I don't buy at all. To me, this is a franchise player that you have under control for, at that time, 5 more seasons. So I didn't put any stock in it at all. And I think with the first half that CJ Abrams has put together, you look at him and say, well, the next time the Nationals are a contending team, which is this year and hopefully next year, you'd like him to be a part of it. So I think how well he's played makes it that much harder to try to trade him.
Why has Foster Griffin been so good and come out of nowhere?
Well, he's a pitcher's pitcher. I mean, we didn't know a lot about him when he was signed. I mean, we heard he left the United States 3 years ago with 4 pitches and came back with 7. So apparently, he found those 3 pitches and he found a whole bunch of maturity. He had been injured. He had never really had much of a chance to establish his footing in the major league. So he goes over there. He has a chance to have success, finds out who he is as a pitcher and what works. And he's different. I mean, you saw what he did in the All-Star game. He had the hitters lunging at his changeup, and then, they think he's going to go away. Then he busts him inside with a cutter. He can be a different guy every time he faces a hitter. And that's why I think Blake Butera has shown the confidence to allow him to face a lineup 3 times, occasionally 4 times, pitch into the 7th or 8th inning, because it's not like he's the same pitcher in the 1st inning and the 5th inning. He can attack a hitter so many different ways, and that makes him very unique among today's pitchers. He doesn't wow you with velocity, but he can pinpoint all of his pitches to the different quadrants of the strike zone, stay out of the middle of the plate, change speeds. And if you're a hitter trying to guess, it's a lot easier to guess when a guy throws 2 pitches than when a guy throws 7. Odds are you're going to be wrong if you're guessing with Foster Griffin.
How many pitches did Anibal Sanchez have when he was pitching for the Nats in 2019?
Well, it felt like 5. I mean, he had the changeup and he had the dead fish changeup. He had like this.
Yeah.
Max Scherzer said it best. He said Anibal Sanchez changed speeds on his changeup better than any pitcher he ever saw. And he could mix in, sinker and a slider. But the beauty of Anibal was he could throw you a changeup at 75 and then a changeup at 65 and then a changeup at 71. And so the changeup was the kind of 3 different varieties of it, even though he called it the same thing. And by the way, back when Anibal Sanchez was with the Nationals, the sweeper didn't exist. That used to be a slider. We've renamed everything. So the fact that we have more names allows Griffin to have 7 pitches, because 4 years ago, if he was throwing that same sweeper, it'd be called a slider.
Yeah, we're talking to Dave Jagler, of course. You guys recognize the voice. I was wondering, because when he started to pitch well, Tommy and Livero and I were talking, and I said, who does he remind you of? Who's the comp? Like, this guy is clearly pitching more with his brain than anything else. And I'm wondering if you've comped him to anybody.
Well, I mean, Sanchez would be pretty good in that. The other in Nationals history is Livan Hernandez, because Livan, the tail end of his career, when he first came up with the Marlins, he threw gas. But when we saw him in 2005, and then the later iteration of Levo, which was like 2010, 2011, he was a pitcher's pitcher, and he would throw that lollipop curveball, and then he'd paint the outside corner with a sinker at 89. And while 89 might not seem like a lot, if you were looking for the 60, the 89 would look like 109, and that's what Foster Griffin does. So, I mean, kind of a left-handed version of Levo is one that jumps out to me.
I just always remember that performance against the Cardinals in the NLCS from Sanchez. I don't know if anything hit much more than 82 or 83 miles per hour in that game, and he was brilliant. Give me a player that you think it's not technically the second half, but it's referred to as the second half of the season. Give me a player that you think is on the verge of making a much bigger contribution than he has already.
Well, I mean, I'd like to see that be Dalen Lyle. I mean, you look at what Luis Garcia Jr. and Curtis Meade have done. They've been a nice complement to the Wood-Abrams duo. Lyle, with what he did last September, looked like he was on the verge of a breakout, and Lyle's had some moments this year, but I think just kind of consistently, he's probably been a little bit disappointed in the total output, but we know it's in there. We saw it at the tail end of last season. Now this is his first full year in the major leagues. Teams have a book on him. Can he make the adjustment and get back to being the dynamic player that he was at the end of last season? He's made tremendous strides defensively, but I think the impact offensively, if he can have the second half that he had last year, that'd be huge to have him bat behind Abrams. Because right now you have that Wood-Abrams pocket 1 through 4, which, if it's Garcia against a righty, Meade in there, that's a pretty stout portion of the lineup. If you can get deeper in that lineup with Lyle and Cruz, and Ruiz has done a nice job at the bottom of the lineup, then you have the speed down there. If Lyle can have a big second half, I think this team will continue to be at or near the top of the league in runs scored.
Be fun to see them in contention when we hit September. Real quickly on the All-Star game from the other night, what do you think the future of this game is?
Interesting you say that. I turned to I'm like, I was frankly kind of losing interest once Foster Griffin was done. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I think it's still a good exhibition, and there's a lot to it. It's just that particular game, not a lot happened. There were so many strikeouts. There was not a ton of action or exciting plays. I mean, I think the game is in a good place with it. I mean, I like that we went away from putting the home field advantage on it. I mean, it is an exhibition game, and you like to see the best players. And I like the fact that the starters get 2 at bats, the reserves get in there, and so I like seeing all the different players. I think it's fine as it is. I think this was just a one-off that there wasn't a whole lot of action. Too many strikeouts. It was kind of a snoozer after the top of the first inning. Much more excitement at the end of the home run derby. But I think over the course of time, it's still the top All-Star game of the 4 major sports. I mean, I don't even watch whatever they do flag football now, and I've never been a big fan of the NBA All-Star game. But I think baseball still has the best All-Star game. It's just the other night was not its best.
Yeah, I think that's true, by the way. But I no Shohei Ohtani. You've got to get the superstars in the game to not opt out of this thing.
Right. When you look at that, and you look at no Aaron Judge because he was hurt. I mean, the Ohtani thing.
No Skeens, right?
Ohtani was going to be in there if not, his knee was flaring up. But you're absolutely right. If guys bow out of the game, then that's not a good thing. I mean, I still think though it was a good showcase for some of the young stars who were there.
All right. I'll ask you a question you may not want to answer, but just give me trade deadline couple days before. How many games out of the wild card third spot do they need to be for them to be more buyer than anything else?
Probably 2 to 3. I mean, what are they now?
Okay.
Like 4? So
they're 4 now.
Gaining ground on where they are and over 500. I mean, I think if they have, again, like I said before, if they can dominate this road trip and have a good homestand, I think they're right there and can make Paul Tabone's decisions difficult. I mean, I don't think anyone has assumed that the Nationals will be in position to be asking for folks in trade. So I hope this is a great couple of weeks of baseball, and that forces the hand.
Have a safe trip. I appreciate you doing this.
All right, Kevin. My pleasure.
At Dave Jagler, everybody on X. My conversation with Dave Jagler from yesterday. All of our Nats coverage on the Team 980 is presented by Xfinity. Score the most reliable Wi-Fi. One price, 5 years, guaranteed. Xfinity. Imagine that. All right, something learned from these ESPN top 10 position by position rankings. Next, it's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the team980.com. Window Nation has a great deal going on during the month of July. How about paying 50% on every window you purchase? Any window style, 50% off. And then you don't have to pay for anything for 2 years. No down payment required, no monthly payments required, and no interest charged until the year 2028. If you've been thinking about new windows, I highly recommend giving Window Nation a chance to come out and give you a free in-home estimate. It'll take an hour or less, and you'll find out which windows in your home actually need to be replaced. They'll leave you with a quote, and then they'll leave you alone. If you decide to move forward, in addition to getting a great deal, you're going to be working with a company that was rated #1 by Forbes magazine among all window installation companies in America. This is a company that gets it right almost every time. 96% of their installs go off without a hitch. No follow-up service required. They'll leave your home looking nicer than when they arrived. And I promise you, as a listener to this show, they're going to take really good care of you. If you've been thinking about new windows for your home, make your home look better, save big money on utility bills, Window Nation is the place to go. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com. So we've spent some time, Max and I have this week, talking about the ESPN position group by position group rankings, list/ranking time of the year. And I got this from Randy G. Randy G wrote, Kevin, the ESPN rankings you shove down our throats is actually depressing when you really think about it, but also a compliment to you. I've been a listener for a long time, and some of the top 10 players are players you wanted the Skins to draft, and they passed and picked much lesser players instead. Kyle Hamilton is ranked #1 among safeties, and that was your guy in that draft. Christian Gonzalez, the #3 corner, was everyone's preference, and they picked Forbes instead. I remember you pushing for Derrick Henry when they picked Josh Doxson. No, Randy G, your memory fails you there. I absolutely wanted them to select Josh Doxson. He said, you like Derwin James instead of Deron Payne, and how about the team trading back instead of selecting Cooper DeJean? The list goes on the players in these ESPN rankings that the team passed on to pick a loser instead. Our roster could be so much better with competence in the GM seat. So thanks for that, Randy, and I appreciate your kindness, even though your memory failed you. I actually did not want Derwin James. I wanted Deron Payne in that 2018 draft. So you remembered that inaccurately as well. I was a big fan of Deron Payne coming out in 2018, and I loved the idea of pairing him with John Allen, who was picked the year before. Remember, 2014, 15, 16, just disastrous defensive years, kind of like where we are right now. And they drafted John Allen. There was a player in that draft that Cooley desperately wanted. I'll get to that in a moment. But they went John Allen, Deron Payne back-to-back. Now, Derwin James was a defensive player and a good one, and I do remember liking Derwin James, but I like Deron Payne in that draft. I went back after reading Randy's email, and I spent some time going through all of the ESPN position group players, the top 10s, the honorable mentions, and the others receiving votes. Now, I'm sure that fans of other teams could play this game as well. I just don't know if they can play it as well as we can. First of all, Washington had just 4 players total on these lists. Just one in the top 10, and that was Laramie Tunsil at #5 among offensive tackles. Jaden was honorable mention, and then Terry and Frankie Louvu got others receiving votes. On the safety list yesterday, by the way, I was curious to see if Nick Cross would make others receiving votes. He did not. He had a good year last year in Indy. I don't know if this is true, but 4 total players on top 10, honorable mention, others receiving votes. It's got to be near the bottom of the league. It has to be. Now, I wouldn't be like ultra concerned because I do think if the list extended to say the next 25 best players at those positions, Washington would have a lot of those. But they don't have elite players. We've known that for a while. By the way, the teams with the most top 10 players on those lists were the Lions with 9, the Eagles with 8, the Chiefs with 7. This is the top 10, just in the top 10, not counting honorable mention and others receiving votes. The top 10 position by position group. Detroit was number 1 with 9 players. Philly, number 2 with 8. Kansas City, number 3 with 7. Houston had 6. And then the Rams, Cowboys, 49ers, Ravens, and Broncos each had 5. Washington had 1. Tunsil. But I'm going to take you through some of what I found when kind of looking closely at these lists like Randy did. If you start with just the highest ranked players on the lists, Washington absolutely had shots at some of these guys. The number 1 safety in the league, as Randy mentioned, Baltimore's Kyle Hamilton. And yes, I was a big Kyle Hamilton guy in the 2022 draft. Remember, our team had number 11 overall. Hamilton was on the board at 11, but we traded back and picked Jahan Dotson and later got Sam Howell and Brian Robinson Jr. And our fans thought in the moment Ron Rivera was playing chess, over checkers. But that aside, yes, the number 1 safety in the NFL 4 years after that draft is Kyle Hamilton. Also, one other thing about who they picked, Jahan Dotson, I liked Jahan Dotson in that draft. I was a big fan of him at Penn State, not like some of the other receivers in the draft. I think Drake London would have been the selection had he fallen to Washington. Scott Turner shared that with us when he was on last month. But I liked Jahan Dotson, but I didn't want them to pass on Hamilton. I really did like Hamilton, and they could have Kyle Hamilton on their team because he was sitting there at 11. I was just going through these lists. Another number 1 player on these lists, Leonard Williams, was the number 1 defensive tackle in the league. That actually surprised me. I think Jeffrey Simmons is probably the number 1 defensive tackle in the league. But anyway, in 2015, he was picked 6th overall, right after Washington picked Brandon Sheriff. Leonard Williams was an absolute stud coming into that draft, and Washington needed defense. That was the first Scott McCloughan draft, 2015, and McCloughan's told me, on the show a couple of times over the years that he loved Sheriff. He, called him a football player. He was a football player's football player, and the team really did need, a player that could play. And so his floor was very high. And I think, Scott basically considered Sheriff to be the safer pick. And there were some, flags on Leonard Williams coming out. Now, look, if they had drafted Leonard Williams and at number 5, he probably wouldn't be on the roster right now. But yes, a number 1 position ranked player on these rankings was available in that 2015 draft. I liked Leonard Williams in that draft a lot. I remember specifically liking Leonard Williams and Amari Cooper. So I would have been wrong on Cooper, right on Williams. And remember with Sheriff was the throwaway line from Jay Gruden when he was talking about what they got in the first round of the 2015 and 2016 drafts. And he said, we got a receiver and a guard. I think McCloughan was hopeful that Sheriff could play tackle, but Jay has, talked about this many times. They knew in his very first rookie minicamp day that he was not a tackle. He was a guard. He had short arms. By the way, did you guys know Brandon Sheriff was retired? I actually didn't know that. I looked it up. He retired after last year. The 2018 draft, Derwin James was on the board. I'm just going through, and he's the number 2 safety. So they could have drafted Derwin James instead of Daron Payne. They could have drafted Kyle Hamilton. They wouldn't have drafted a great safety had they had Derwin James. But Yeah, I like Duran in that draft. We all know the story of the number 3 ranked corner in the league. That was a miss, no doubt. Christian Gonzalez was there. Belichick kind of laughed when Washington took Forbes. I did like Gonzalez more. That is true. But I actually did not think the Forbes pick in the moment was terrible. I thought his playmaking ability was intriguing. The Derrick Henry thing. Appreciate that, Randy. He's the number 6 running back on this list, but I was all over Josh Doxson in that draft. Very wrong about that. By the way, in the 2017 draft, and I mentioned that they selected John Allen. That was the draft. Cooley was so good at evaluating draft prospects. Before that 2017 draft, he said on the air repeatedly, whoever passes on TJ Watt will regret it forever. He's the best player in the draft. Now, he was wrong about that because Myles Garrett was the best player in that draft, right? That's the Myles Garrett draft. But he loved TJ Watt watching his Wisconsin film. I remember him saying over and over again, this is going to be a massive mistake. We should be taking this guy. He's going to be a problem that the league's going to have to deal with for years. Washington took John Allen. Watt went 13 picks later to Pittsburgh. Watt's the number 7 pass rusher on the list of pass rushers. I actually think that's still low for him. Cooley loved several players in that draft, including Christian McCaffrey, who he called the best receiver. He said if he had come into the draft as a receiver, he would have been the number 1 receiver picked in the draft. He loved George Kittle. I remember, and Kittle was what, a 4th or a 5th round pick? And he was like, there's this guy. I'm telling you, this guy's going to be good. He was good at that. Cooper DeJean, look, I didn't mind the trade back 2 years ago in 2024, but obviously you wouldn't pass on DeJean knowing what you know now. Just after 2 seasons, he's the number 10 cornerback in the NFL on these lists. So in these rankings, there were big misses. Yes, a bit depressing, Randy. Kyle Hamilton, Christian Gonzalez, Cooper DeJean. Just in recent years, imagine having those 3 players on your team instead of the players you got, Dotson, Forbes, and then, the second rounders that Washington ended up taking. Look, the 2024 draft is still in play in terms of how it will play out. But DeJean really looks like a player. By the way, don't forget, Trent Williams is the number 2 offensive tackle on the offensive tackle list. Montez Sweat was others receiving votes among pass rushers. Yeah, thanks for that, Randy. That was a depressing exercise. All right, we got more show coming up. We'll get to it. Don't forget, you can watch this show on our Team 980 YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there. Also, if you listen to this show podcast style after the show is over, rate and review the show as a podcast. It's really easy to do. It takes less than a minute to click 5 stars if you think the show deserves it and write a quick review on Apple. It's very helpful for us as well. So on Sunday, I am heading to the World Cup final in Jersey. Full disclosure, the World Cup final has never been on my own personal sports bucket list. Just not a big soccer guy. I've mentioned, over the last couple of months, the fact that I am going to this game. My younger brother, who has lived abroad for 3 decades now, is a soccer fan. He's not a supporter of any, I love supporter instead of fan. He's not a supporter of any specific team, but he likes the sport and he loves the big events. He's been to the Champion League final. He's been to Premier League games. And he's asked me before to go with him to those things, to meet him over there. And he has told me, you're going to love it. He's like me. He grew up going to RFK Stadium. He grew up going to Cole Fieldhouse, two of the true electric environments in sports during those days. And he loves that feeling of being in a building, in a stadium that is just, big event feel. And he's told me before, some of these Premier League games are just insane. I've just never had a desire to do it. And I think it's always been at a time when I couldn't do it work-wise. But about 2 months ago, right, Max? About 2 months ago, he reached out to me and he said, he didn't ask me. He actually just told me. He just said,
you're going.
Unless you've got a really good excuse, you are going to the World Cup final with me on July 19th. I have a ticket for you. You're going with me and his son, my nephew, period. End of conversation. You're not getting out of this one. You're going. So I am leaving tonight. I'm going up to the city, going up to New York. 2 of my 3 sons are going to be in New York. One lives there. One is just in town. So we've got some, dinners and things planned tonight and tomorrow night. And then on Sunday, 3 p.m. start time, Meadowlands, I will be there for the World Cup final. When he asked me, there was no hesitation. Yeah, of course. It's not on my bucket list, but of course, you get a chance to go to a World Cup final, you're going to go. So I will be there Sunday for Argentina and Spain. I won't have a rooting interest at all. I guess I'd love to see Messi score a goal or make some incredible plays. Maybe, root for extra time and a penalty kick situation. That would be pretty dramatic. I do have a train coming back Sunday night. I don't want the game to go too long. I honestly don't know what to expect. I've been told that this might be more of a corporate crowd, like, the Super Bowl is. I guess I'll find out when I get there on Sunday. So no soccer game has ever been on my sports bucket list. And again, Sunday's World Cup final, never been on my sports bucket list. Legit excited to go to it. But if he hadn't called up and said, I got a ticket, I wouldn't have been trying to go to the World Cup final, which would have been rather pricey and way out of my price range, or any of these other games. I guess could have gone to Philly. I know some people that went up to Philly for a couple of games. Scott went up to Philly and watched France play. Van Pelt did and took his family. And he said it was great. He said it was incredible. He was also at Wimbledon last week. He gets around. He was also, I did tell everybody this, right? Did I tell everybody this, Max, or not? I wasn't supposed to say anything about it, and I'm not going to share any of the details that he shared with me, but he and his wife went to Taylor Swift's wedding. I told you that, right?
No.
Oh, I didn't tell you that?
No.
He got invited
I didn't know he was on the guest
wedding.
list.
He was there. Yeah.
I would ask him about it, but I'm sure he signed something saying he can't.
Well, when I was away last week, I was away with him and his family. My wife and I were over in Paris with Scott, his wife, and their kids. We had planned to do a Paris trip with them a couple of years ago when his house burnt down. Remember?
I do remember that.
He was coming back from the Masters. I've told the story. He calls me and he says, can you get to my house? Apparently there's like a fire or something. And I drove to his house and it was quite the fire. Yeah, that was I've shared that story, I think, with most of you before. I got there. He's on a plane coming back from the Masters. His family they're out of town. Fortunately, nobody was in the house. And he from the plane, he texted me and he said, "Well," and I hesitated to respond immediately because I just didn't want
would
him to be alarmed by the situation. And he's told the story before. He's like, he goes, when it took you a minute or 2 minutes and the text message thing was kind of blinking, like you're thinking about what to write.
Oh yeah, the collar gets real tight.
Yeah, he said, I knew that it wasn't good. And I can't remember specifically what I texted him. Something like, it's not great, but it could have been worse. You guys could have been in the house. Anyway, we were supposed to go to Paris that week. Scott, his wife, my wife, and I, and obviously we didn't. So this was sort of a makeup for that. The wives have been working on it for a while. So we were over there. We actually watched France and Morocco from like the streets of Paris, moving from like one outdoor cafe bar to another. It was actually really cool to be in a country where it matters so much. Yeah, he went to France, one of the preliminary stage games in Philly, and he said it was incredible. He said it was really, really electric, and the fans were amazing. Who'd France play in I'll tell you which game he went to. Who'd they play in the preliminary stages?
Pulling up their group stage games now. They played Senegal, Norway, and Iraq.
Yeah, I think it was against Iraq. I think that's the game. Yeah, it was. It was the Iraq game that they went to. So anyway, I'm going to be there Sunday. I'm excited to be there Sunday, but again, full disclosure, never been on my sports bucket list. So it is mid-July. It is All-Star Week. It is the slowest week on the sports calendar. I am sitting, in here keeping an eye on all of these players going very low, very, very low today at the British Open at Royal Birkdale. I mean, this guy, Lucas Herbert, shot 62. Sam Burns is in with a 62 already. So they are tearing up the course today in the British Open. But it is the slowest sports week of the year, so it's bucket list talk. So what is on my sports bucket list? What is on Max's sports bucket list? And what is on your sports bucket list? 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. Phone lines are open. What's your number one sports bucket list item? The event, the game that you'd want to go to, that you swear somehow you are going to go to before you die. I'm going to give you my top three. Max is going to give you his. I have been very fortunate, not just because of the business that I'm in. That's certainly been helpful, but prior to getting into this business, I was lucky enough to go to a lot of really good sporting events. I've been to a lot of big time college football environments. I've been to LSU Bama at night in Death Valley. That's a top 3-4 sporting event I have ever been to, ever. I've never been in a football environment like LSU's Death Valley at night against their arch rival, Alabama. It was an insane atmosphere. There were 100,000 people in the stadium and another 150,000 outside the stadium. It was a party like you read about. And then when you got into the actual venue, I've never heard noise like that in a football stadium. RFK was close, but it was also half the people, basically. Been to Michigan, Ohio State in the Big House. That was okay. I would rather go to Michigan, Ohio State in Columbus. I've heard the Ohio State fans. I've been to Columbus for a game, just not Ohio State, Michigan. And Ohio State fans are insane. I've been to a lot of big fights in Vegas. I've been to Super Bowls. I've been to World Series, plural, including the Nats a few years ago. Final Fours, plural. I've been to Wimbledon. I've been to the U.S. Open tennis and the U.S. Open golf. I've been to the Masters. I've been to Cameron Indoor for a game, not Duke, Carolina. Been to the Garden for a Knicks playoff game. I've been to a lot of college football venues, just a bunch. Penn State whiteout games, Georgia, West Virginia, Ole Miss. Been to a lot of college football venues. There's one I have not been to. I've never had much interest in either the Olympics. I mean, if I were to go to an Olympics, I think I'd rather go to the Winter Olympics just for the potential of it being really pretty with snow and villages and stuff like that. I don't know. I've never been to any of the Olympics. My preference as a viewer are the Summer Olympics. I love the Summer Olympics to watch. I love track and field. I love basketball. I used to love boxing. Never been to the Kentucky Derby, but it's not really on my bucket list. I've never been to the Indy 500, not really on my bucket list. So here is my top three, all right? And then Max will get to his, and then I want yours at 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. There's like a real big tie. There are like 5 or 6 places that would tie for third. There's a clear top 2 for me, and then there are a bunch of tied for thirds. But I'm just going to give you one of my tied for thirds. I would love to go to a big game, preferably featuring Maryland at Assembly Hall in Indiana. I've actually been in Assembly Hall, but not for a game. I took one of my boys there on a college trip, had to go in there. It was actually really strange. It's very vertical. But Naki's told me Assembly Hall is special. Other people have told me how special Assembly Hall is. And because Maryland plays there as a member of the Big Ten, that's going to be something that I do in the next few years. A Maryland-Indiana game. Hopefully it's a big game at Assembly Hall. So that's my number 3, although I've got like 4 or 5 that are tied with that. But I'm just going to give you that as number 3. Number 2 for me is easy. I want to go to South Bend to see Notre Dame play USC. Never been to Notre Dame Stadium. I'm of that age of Notre Dame football being a massive deal. It's funny because my boys don't get it. They're like, what? You don't want to go to Notre Dame for a game? I'm like, yeah, it's hallowed ground for a sports fan, for a college football fan. And I'd want it to be against USC in South Bend. That's my number 2. I'll give you my number 1 when we come back. And it's a clear-cut number 1. Like, this has always been on my sports bucket list. I've never been. I certainly could do it and will at some point, God willing. I'll give you my number 1. Max will give you his. I want your number 1 sports bucket list event, game, whatever it is that you want to go to before you die. 301-230-0980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the team980.com. What's your bucket list sports event game that you want to attend before you are long gone from this earth? 301-230-0980. I've given you two of my top three. I'll give you my number one in a moment. Max will share his number one. By the way, our Waldorf Honda Twitter poll of the day is the World Cup on your bucket list? Yes or no? It's not on mine, and I'm going. Our X poll, our Twitter poll of the day, driven by Waldorf Honda. It all starts with a click. I found this website. It was a Substack story written by Chad something. He put together the ultimate sports bucket list by venue, by stadium, by arena, etc. And gave the top places in each sport. For Major League Baseball, Fenway. I've been to Fenway many, many years ago now. I had to get up on Monday mornings, fly to Boston, and fly home Fridays. I had to commute to Boston for about 16 months when I was younger for a company that I was involved in. And I went to Fenway probably like 12 times. It was awesome. It was great. Wrigley is on the MLB list. I've never been to Wrigley. Dodger Stadium, I've been to Dodger Stadium, and then Camden Yards. Those are the four baseball parks he puts on the ultimate sports fans bucket list stadiums or venues. NFL, he's only got two, Lambeau and Soldier Field. I don't have any interest in going to Soldier Field. Lambeau, yes. That's one of those that was tied for third. I've never been to Lambeau. Would love to go to Lambeau. Are those, in terms of NFL stadiums, hallowed ground? I think Buffalo is a place that people would love to see a game in, a big Bills game, right? Probably Arrowhead should be on that list. Arrowhead should be on the NFL list with Lambeau. Arrowhead should be on there before Soldier Field, I think. Then NBA and NHL, Madison Square Garden and the United Center. No. I'll tell you the place that people say is truly special is Montreal for a hockey game. College football, there's a lot of places on here. Neyland Stadium, Rose Bowl, Horseshoe, Ohio State, the Coliseum, West Point, LSU, Michigan, Bryant-Denny, Notre Dame, Lane Stadium. I've never been to a Virginia Tech game at night. I've heard that's awesome. Lots of college basketball on here. They got a bunch of them on here. All right, so back to my bucket list top three. Number three, I've got a bunch of places. I'll mention some of the others, but I settled in on Assembly Hall, Indiana. I'd love it to be for an Indiana-Maryland game. Number two is Notre Dame, USC in South Bend. My friend Ted just texted me and said, did you know that 2025 was the last Notre Dame USC game for a while? Is that true? I think he's right about that.
He is.
Yeah. And that there aren't any future games scheduled. Well, eventually they'll get back to playing. That's been on my bucket list. And then number one for me, and this is clear-cut number one, I've been to Cameron Indoor, but I want to go to Cameron Indoor for Duke, Carolina, because apparently it is just unbelievable. Been there for Duke, Maryland, been there for a couple of other things, and it's great. It is, I think the thing about Cameron Indoor, if you don't know this, is just how tiny it is. It holds like 8,000, 9,000. It's tiny. It's a gym for all intents and purposes, but man, is it an electric atmosphere. But I've never been to Duke, Carolina. That would be my number one on my bucket list. Max, what do you got?
My number one is probably the same for a lot of people in our listening audience. The Masters. It is just one of my favorite tournaments just in sports every year. Augusta, it's just, there's so much to be said about it. It's so beautiful. It's just absolutely impressive every time that I look at it, either in pictures or on screen. So Masters is the dream. Number two for me, there's a game coming up this year, Kevin, in the college football realm. LSU is going to Ole Miss September 19th, 2026.
Yeah. Well,
Lane
especially for Kiffin. Yeah.
Exactly. Kiffin's return to Ole Miss, that would be
insane.
Yeah, that would be a
But,
bucket list
you got to get there early and you got to hang out in the Grove for a few hours.
Oh, no. What a shame that would be. I would hate that.
The sites are attractive, let's just say.
Quite. And then number 3, I'm going to go a little international here. F1, the Monaco Grand Prix. I think that is it would just be a really cool event to go to. I mean, I don't get out of the country very often, but if I were to, Monaco would be I'd be dirt poor there, but
yes, you would be.
It would be a great time. That's true.
My oldest son and the company that he works for, he went to the F1 in Vegas 2 years ago, whenever it was.
The street race?
Yeah, he said it was incredible.
Yeah.
He's into F1. I think the Netflix series totally hooked him on F1. Yeah. You know what? If you're going to do that, you'd want to do it in Monaco. But you're probably not going to be able to wear to the race what you're wearing right now, nor would I in studio.
Correct.
But who cares? All right. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. What's your number one sports bucket list item? And again, if I didn't say this already, we're not coming up with hypotheticals because all of us would love to say, oh, my number one is Skins Super Bowl, wherever the Super Bowl, maybe at the RFK site. We're not talking about, the necessary act of God thing. We're talking about events that actually exist that you can go to. Although I guess I just learned that Notre Dame, USC, in South Bend or in the Coliseum isn't happening for a while.
After
so don't give me the, I'd love the Wizards to be in the NBA Finals and I want to go to that. We're talking about things that that you can go to because they exist now. Let's start with Jamal in Northeast. Jamal, what's your number one sports bucket?
Hey, what's going on, Kevin?
How are you, Jamal?
Hello.
You're on, Jamal. How are you? Jamal can't hear us.
I guess not.
I can hear Jamal. Put him on hold. Let's go to our guy Ross in Tampa.
Hey, Kevin, what's good in the hood?
What's up, Ross?
Hello.
Oh no,
we're having some phone issues.
Oh, I got some. Hello.
How about now?
Hello.
Can you hear me now, Ross?
I hear you. I can hear you, Kevin.
Okay, got it now. All right. Good work, Max. All right. What's your number one, Ross?
All right. My number one was actually checked off last year when my uncle gave me some unexpected tickets to the Broncos game. I was right there when my man Burks had caught that one-handed catch. It was like the best thing ever.
Oh, Denver, Washington, Sunday night. Okay. All right. That was a bucket list item? Well, you mean just going to a Skins game? You had not been to a Skins game before?
I've never been to a home Skins game. Whenever they came to Indianapolis every 8 years or whenever they came to Tampa, I would go.
Yeah. Right.
And then something that I haven't done that I would love to go is to Athens, Georgia, Sanford Stadium at night. I don't care who they playing. I got to go to a nighttime Georgia game because that right there is something crazy. And
nuts.
Absolutely, Kevin, I would recommend Assembly Hall. I was at the game when Indiana hit the jump shot against Kentucky to beat them at the buzzer beater.
Oh,
and a little fun fact for you. Andy Pollin. His son and I are the same age. We're not friends, but we were hanging out in mutual company that night.
Oh, yeah. Jeremy went to Indiana, and Jeremy's a huge sports fan.
I've
heard that Assembly Hall for a big game is truly special. I'll tell you the other place in the Big Ten, because Naki's been everywhere now calling Terps games. He said Mackey for Purdue is incredible also. Really
they're
great.
Over the Indiana pipeline when it comes to talents out of high school for sure.
Yeah.
I think IU, they're just going to always and forever be that brand in high school, college basketball in Indiana. But Purdue's catching up with them because they went to the Final Four a lot more recent than Indiana did. But those are my two bucket lists. One's checked off, and I got to get to Athens, Georgia at nighttime because the atmosphere.
I've been down there between the hedges. It wasn't at night, and they played. It was a Georgia Mississippi State game several years ago, And it was
17,
really
2017?
cool. I would rather go now because they've been so good for so long. But it definitely was an incredible atmosphere. Thanks, Ross. Let's get back to Jamal. Hopefully, we have figured it out with Jamal. Go ahead, Jamal.
Hey, what's going on, Kevin?
How are you, Jamal?
I'm great, man. Nice to talk to you as always. So mine would be number 3. I'm going to go. I would love to go to the Iron Bowl, no matter where it is, and whether it's at Tuscaloosa or at Auburn's home. I would love to go there. I would love your number 1 was actually my number 2. I would love to go to the Duke Carolina game at Cameron, and I want the whole experience with the camping out thing that they do. Like I want to experience all of that. But number 1 for me would be a heavyweight championship fight in Vegas at MGM. My uncle, he's gone to one. He's also gone to a Super Bowl, the greatest Super Bowl ever, in my opinion, with the one in Tampa with Pittsburgh and in Arizona. And he told me that even that couldn't compare to a heavyweight championship fight in Vegas. He was like that's like the greatest thing ever. So I got to make it out to Vegas to MGM to experience that.
So I've been to a lot of big fights in Vegas, and a lot of them came during boxing's like in the 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s. Actually, more, even in the 2010s. Tommy and I went to several big fights in Vegas for work. We did shows from there. But I'm going to tell you that anybody that's ever been a really big fight in Vegas will tell you it is way up there on the list. There is a feeling, there's an electricity in the arena. There is a feeling when those fighters come out and get into that ring. You cannot explain it in terms of how tense it is and how incredibly exciting it is. I saw Sugar, the first fight that I ever went to in Vegas was Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns, number 2, which came 8 years after the Epic at Caesar's Palace. And it was a great fight. I still think Hearns won the fight. So I got a chance to see Sugar Ray fight out there. I saw Holyfield fight out there several times. It's tremendous. But I don't know if it's the same anymore. Because boxing isn't the same anymore. So anyway, thanks, Jamal. Appreciate it. Let's go to Jason in Laurel. Jason, what's your bucket list, short list that you haven't been to that you want to go to?
Hey, Coach, love this topic, by the way. Anything's better than BA talk. And I got to be coachable because you're
we got some BA talk coming up, by the way. There's a new someone weighing in on the Brandon Ayuk situation. That's coming up in about 15 to 20 minutes. But go ahead, Jason. Jason? Do we have Jason?
We do have Jason still here. I don't know if Jason muted his phone. I haven't touched the phone since I fixed it. Let me throw Jason back on hold.
Let's go to James in D.C. Put Jason back on hold. Let's go to James in D.C.
Kevin, great mid-July sports show topic. Fantastic. Great to talk to you.
You too, James.
Hey, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
I got you. Yep.
Hey, anyway, I have 2 main bucket list items. They're international, but before I get to that, I'm a huge college football guy, big Miami fan, and I've been to Neyland, Happy Valley, late at night. But to me, my favorite road experience was South Bend. Nothing like it. Miami came to play South Notre Dame in 2016. Loved it. They play once more this fall. I think it's going to be a while before they play again, but fantastic. Highly recommend. But
that would be awesome. I've never been to South Bend for a game, and USC would be the one, but I'd love to see Miami against Notre Dame too. Is that this year?
It's this fall in November, so it's probably going to be a 1-2 matchup, maybe. It's going to be a great game. So my 2 bucket list items are Wimbledon Center Court and a Champions League soccer final in Europe. I've been dying to go see one of those 2, but those would be on my list.
Yeah, the Champions League final, my brothers told me, is incredible. I went to Wimbledon, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago, something like that. And it was pretty cool, no doubt. I think the memory that I have of Wimbledon was it's so much smaller, the entire venue, than you would think with all of those courts and stadiums. And center court was tremendous. Thanks, James. Let's go to Anthony in D.C. Anthony, go ahead.
So, Kevin, at this point in life, I'm pretty jaded, so I'd rather watch everything on TV right now. But
yeah, truth be told, we're at that age where it's just a lot easier. Yes,
exactly, and you see so much more. But
no doubt,
if there was one event that I would like to see, it would be NBA Finals Game 7 that was competitive.
Yeah, that would be a good one too. No, where would you want it to be though?
Of course, you wanted to be here, but
I know, but let's be realistic. Like,
I would have loved to have been in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, the Garden. I think that's probably to see a Game 7 in the Garden, the NBA Finals. I mean, that's hypothetical. Yeah. I was trying to exclude hypotheticals, but yes, that would be special. I mean, we have really been deprived, Anthony. We've talked about this before. We have really been deprived from what we could have had for all of these decades. I mean, just give us a couple of Game 7s at home in the NBA playoffs. We haven't had one at home since 79. And we've only had one period, and that was the one in 17 at Boston. That's really insane when you think about it. As Bullets Wizards fans, we have not had a Game 7 in our town in 47 years. It's disgusting, actually.
I've been to the Cap Center. I've been to NCI. I mean,
NCI Capital One's never had a Game 7. Never.
Right.
For basketball.
Before you let me go, I gotta chime in on this. Okay. And I'll be real quick. So, in my humble opinion, DMV extends to in the Fort Washington, in the Bowie, in the Rockville, up to the Springfield Exchange. Anything beyond those places I listed is homogenized. When you flow through the particular areas, you have this.
Oh, so you're shortening it up compared to me.
You're shortening it to where I'm at.
You're where Mitch was. Right. Well, not even. You're a little bit further out than Mitch.
Well, I'm being generous with the Springfield Exchange, but when you get to certain areas, there's a gritty feel about what the environment is like. The further out you get, you start losing that vibe. So
it becomes more rural. Yeah,
suburban.
Exactly. That's the point.
Well, it's not even suburban. Point. It's rural when you get out to certain areas in Maryland. And I mean, like I said, I used to always kid Cooley. I'm like, you don't live in Washington. You live in West Virginia. You live in Leesburg. You're closer to West Virginia. You live in, there are farms around your house. Right. There are chickens running wild. I mean, there are horses everywhere. This isn't, the DMV. But I had somebody, Anthony, Emmanuel tweeted me, not sure if you're done with this conversation, but the rule is if you can get to it via metro or bus, it's the DMV. At least that's how native Washingtonians view it. You and I are both native Washingtonians. I've never thought of it from that standpoint, but how far, I'm not a big mass transit person, but I think the red line goes out to where? Does it go to beyond Gaithersburg?
I think it goes to Gaithersburg, but Gaithersburg is not DMV to me.
It is to me. Gaithersburg's DMV. If you're in a Montgomery County high school, you're a Skins fan, you're a Caps fan, Nats fan, you're DMVer. Gaithersburg is DMV. Definitely DMV. And I think really Dulles Airport East is beyond Dulles Airport, which, by the way, now we're talking about where Redskins Park is, in Ashburn. I think is, and by the way, we've got the new, what line is that? Is that the yellow line? What is it?
The purple's the one that's coming.
No, the purple's going to College Park through Chevy Chase.
Yeah, yellow and blue go south into Virginia.
Right.
I'm sorry, but anywhere you have to drive almost 2 hours from the middle of the city to get.
Well, you don't have to drive 2 hours from the middle of the city to get to Gaithersburg. If you drive 2 hours, how far do you have to drive from the middle of the city for it to be considered DMV?
You said beyond Dulles. You said Dulles in.
I said to
beyond.
Dulles.
Well, that's still quite a drive, Kevin. Come on now.
For the middle of the city, it's 35 minutes.
Well, I haven't driven out there in a while, but I don't know.
I drove out there last week. I live in the city, not in the middle of the city, but 30 minutes we got there in 35. Okay. I mean, rush hour. Look, it can take you 2 hours to get to Fairfax in rush hour. But yeah,
like I mean, it goes to a vibe that flows through the areas. You start the further you go out, you start losing the vibe. I'm sorry, but I think
Gaithersburg is more of a DC vibe than Chevy Chase is. If we're going to talk in terms of the vibe,
Chevy Chase is right there on the city, though.
Well, I know that, but what Gaithersburg is the DMV.
Okay.
If you want to make the case that once you cross from Montgomery County into Frederick County, you're no longer in the DMV, I can buy that. But Montgomery County as a whole is the DMV. Fairfax County as a whole is the DMV. And then I think, Loudoun County, certainly part of Loudoun County is the DMV. That's what I would say. All right, we'll agree to disagree. But I want to but your bucket list is a Game 7 somewhere in the NBA Finals. It's always good to talk to Anthony. Anthony is a true DMVer. Jason and Laurel, let's see if we got you back. Go ahead.
Kev, you got me?
I got you now.
Hello. Okay, cool. Awesome. I love the topic, and I think you're right. The Metro is where it all at. But my first one, and I'm not trying not to be coachable. I'd already called in, is a Redskin Super Bowl at Vegas. But my B was the Kentucky Derby. I always wanted to go to the Kentucky Derby, and I love Max's. I would say Max's is my C, Masters, but would love to see a Commanders at Vegas. That trip would bankrupt me.
Yeah. You want to hear something interesting about the Masters? So I got to go about it was 2019, I think, 2018. And it was truly special. There's no doubt about it. It was truly special. I don't think I'd want to go back. It was great. And I know guys that go a lot. The guy that set it up for us, JP was there. We were there with the same guy, a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, JP Finley, I'm talking about. And I think he goes every year.
He does.
Or a lot.
Well, yeah.
I did it once. It's impossible to watch a golf tournament when you're at a golf tournament. It's true. Just, you that's the biggest problem with going to a golf tournament is you don't really know what's going on in the golf tournament. But it was truly special and something that any golf fan should want to do at least once. But once was enough for me. But I totally get. I think the Kentucky Derby is on a lot of people's bucket lists. I've heard it's phenomenal, and I'm sure I would enjoy it. It's never been like a massive desire for me. Just like the Indy 500 or the Daytona 500, not a massive desire. I've heard the Daytona 500 is a must-go for any sports fan, even if they could care less about NASCAR. By the way, Metro goes, the red line actually stops before Gaithersburg. I didn't realize that. It also goes south to almost Fort Belvoir, and then right now out to Ashburn or out to Dulles. Has that line opened up? I don't even know. Let's go to Brian. Brian, give me your number one sports bucket list item. Brian, we're having some issues with our phone lines.
It's quite a day on the phone lines today. I picked up Brian to make sure that he was there, and he's just not there. Bobby, okay. North Carolina. What's up, buddy?
Bobby in North Carolina. Go ahead, Bobby.
Hey, Kevin. Hello. How are you, sir?
Good.
I've been fortunate, Kevin. I've seen some pretty amazing stuff in person. I've been very blessed. But there are three things that I would really love to be able to do before I retire on this earth. I would love to see our Terps play in Cameron. That was always a hard ticket for me to get when Maryland was an ACC. It was impossible. I mean, I saw them every time they went down in here. I saw every game.
But haven't you seen Duke Carolina? Haven't you been to Duke Carolina?
I've never been to Cameron in my life. Never,
okay.
Not one time.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I've seen them in the Greensboro in the tournament, stuff like that, but I've never been in Cameron for any game. I'd love to go see. I know this is simple, and I could get a ticket probably anytime I want to. Virginia Tech night game, man. I would just want to be in that atmosphere in football one time, in the fall, because I think that it comes across TV is pretty cool. And then my all-time, I want to see our Skins in the Super Bowl, wherever they're playing at again, before I leave this earth. But that would be my three. But, Kevin, I've been blessed. I've been to Masters, U.S. Opens. I mean, it's just been – I'm fortunate, been to Daytona a lot when racing was good, but I would love those three I just gave you. I would love to be able to do that one time.
So, thanks, Bobby, as always. I'm looking at my list of, almost made top three, and my top three list again was Duke Carolina at Cameron Indoor, Notre Dame, USC, and South Bend, although the series, I guess, has been discontinued for some time. That Notre Dame Miami game is late in the year. That would be if that's a big game, that would be cool to see Notre Dame, Miami, and South Bend. Seeing a Notre Dame game in South Bend that's a big game would be cool. I mentioned Assembly Hall, Indiana, for like a big game. It would preferably Indiana, Maryland. Mackey, Purdue, Naki has convinced me over the years that place is special. Here's one place that almost made my list: the Palestra in Philadelphia. I've never been to the Palestra in Philadelphia, and that is apparently an absolute must for college basketball fans to see two, Philadelphia teams battle it out. There are a couple of other places, one in particular that I'll mention when we come back. And then we'll get to, I think it's something new on Brandon Ayuk. Just take a deep breath. We haven't talked about him for about 2 days now. He hasn't really said anything for a few days. Maybe this is the true hiatus and he's getting some good advice. But you will hear something that someone did say that sounded pretty definitive about Brandon Ayuk when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. All right, so we still have a couple of callers that I want to get to on bucket list items. My number one was Duke Carolina Cameron Indoor. Max's number one is an F1 race in Monaco. I mean, love it. Monaco just in general, and it's been years, but I have been there. It is spectacular. It's rather expensive. There is that part of it, but I don't know. F1. I started to watch that series, and I got through. You know who got me into that was Brendan. You know, when Brendan was producing this show like 5 years ago. And he's like, you're going to like this show. And I watched like the first 3 or 4 episodes, and I did like it. And then I just kind of went away from it. So anyway, Notre Dame in South Bend. And then I gave out Assembly Hall, Mackey, the Palestra, Auburn, Alabama for sure. But I'd much rather see that game at Jordan Hare than at Bryant Denny, because I've heard Jordan Hare is spectacular. I want to go to Lambeau. I've never been to Lambeau for a game. A Lambeau snow game would be special. And then Allen Fieldhouse for a big Kansas game for sure. And hit the Wheel before. Everybody tells me that the Wheel is the on-campus pub that is a must-go-to either before or after a big Kansas game. G's on hold. What's up?
Oh, yeah, Sheehan, this is my style, man. But Wimbledon or U.S. Open, man, U.S. Open probably be more affordable. But
you're a big tennis guy? I don't know if I knew that about you.
Grew up watching tennis. That's my favorite sport to bet on, point blank, period. But I grew up in the Pete Sampras. I grew up in the Pete Sampras Agassi era. So my father always had me watching tennis. But it would have to be a final of somebody or some name. Like it would have to be Sabalenka versus Coco or something like that. Osaka on her way back, so that would be tantalizing too. Like, but Sinner, Alcaraz, it would have to be something like that. And I would want to go into some place like that because I would feel out of place. So I would want to go in there smelling like a pound of weed and get twisted in that joint and enjoy one of my favorite.
Because you'd be staying high.
That's why I would want to go to the Kentucky Derby, because I heard there's a drinking party, and I'm gonna wear my regular clothes and I'm gonna smell like some weed in there. But Madison Square Garden, I wish that thing had got back to Madison Square Garden for a Clemson game. That's basketball.
I'm gonna tell you. So I know what you're saying about being at a big match if you're going to go to the Open or Wimbledon. But for me, and I've been to the Open several times, it's better to be there like on the middle weekend when you have lots of matches to choose from and you can bounce around from one court to the next. I mean, let's face it. You love tennis, and I used to love tennis. And there were nights the Open would be on with that late night match. You'd be sitting there for 4.5 hours watching Sampras and Agassi, or Courier and Sampras, or before that McEnroe and Connors or something like that. But being at that, it's hard to sit there live for that long without getting up and bouncing around. I think the best weekend for the U.S. Open is like that middle weekend. It's usually Labor Day weekend where you can.
But I ain't got no problem sitting around for that long. I always smuggle my own liquor into all sports venues that I go to.
I'm going with you. We're gonna do that one together.
Hey, Sheehan, I told whoever answering the phone too. I seen highlights on Instagram. I do want to go to one of them lingerie football games, man. I want to be front row for one of those.
That's still a thing.
See a boob pop out or something, but DMV.
What?
The DMV is wherever the metro go, he right. Wherever the bus go, but at the same time, if you a real hooper or sports player, you always got to venture to the D.C. area to play. Because, for instance, Dennis Scott is from Loudoun County. You know what I'm saying? So
Flint Hill.
Steve Francis was one of
Silver
the
Spring, Tacoma Park.
Montgomery County on the map. So if you come down here and make bones down here in the belly of the beast, man, you're going to get credit and put your little...
Yeah, but you know this. I mean, When Anthony said that he doesn't consider Gaithersburg to be the DMV, that's wrong. I mean, you got some good hoops out in that part of the county. Good football too. That is DMV.
No, that's one of the most heartbreaking losses I've seen in high school. I was sitting front row at Cole Fieldhouse watching Oxon Hill High School lose to Gaithersburg in a 5-6 overtime game that should have already been over in regulation, and the ref stunk the gym up. Gaithersburg beat Oxon Hill. There's hoopers like, man, Seneca Valley. That's if you're 15 minutes from Frederick, Maryland, that's not the DMV. But Prince William County done produced so many hoopers and football players.
Well, Seneca Valley's 15 minutes from the Frederick line.
That's why I don't consider Seneca Valley. They had a good football team with the
Seneca Valley was a powerhouse in football in this area in the 70s, 80s.
100%.
And I'm gonna hit you with something you don't know. I guarantee you don't know this because you're a bit younger than I am. Seneca Valley one year in the early to mid 80s was number one in the post poll for football, and they were number one in the post poll for basketball. They had a big dude named Earl Hill that played for him, 6'8", went to St. Bonaventure, I think. And I played against some of those Seneca Valley teams. They were loaded back then. Now, you and I both know if they went head-to-head with DeMatha or St. John's or Mackin back in the day, they're not going to beat those teams. But they did beat, Dunbar, D.C. in a head-to-head. So I don't know. To me, Montgomery County's the DMV, no matter where you are.
You made the argument for Seneca Valley. I just know it's super far. What's the other joint? Quince Orchard. That joint's super far.
Yeah, QO.
You made the argument for them, and I always include Montgomery County, Prince William, Fairfax. You got to include all Fairfax. Man,
okay.
If you come
oh,
to the
of course,
of the beach, man, compete, man.
If you're including all of Fairfax, you're including all of Montgomery. That's the way I see it.
You got people stretching it out even more now because what Nate Ahmet did all the way out there where he was at, he's starting to spread it out a little.
I don't
more.
like him, man. There's something about him I don't like.
But Mac McClung, where he's from, that's not the DMV at all. That's too far.
Well. So Terrence Morris from Frederick, not the DMV. I'm with you on Frederick. I'm with you on at least part of part of Loudon, but Fairfax and Montgomery, I'm sorry, that's DMV to me, even though the Metro doesn't go all the way out through Montgomery County.
Terrence Morris always ventured to the belly of the beast. He's one of
the first major players. But he played at Thomas Hill or whatever the name of that school was. Yeah, all right, I got to go.
AAU with DC Assault, man.
All right, when you and I are going to go to the U.S. Open together, and I'm just going to hang in your orbit, and I'll feel great.
Yes.
Samaj.
Yes, man, I'll buy the plane ticket.
Samaj, what's up?
Hey, Coach. Hey, Max. Thanks for taking my call. Hey, all I'm going to tell you all is the Be More Violated going to be the third wheel. I got to be with you and G for that U.S. Open journey.
That would be fun.
On my list as well.
Yeah.
I got, but me specifically, it doesn't have to be any particular week or part of the U.S. Open. I just want to be in the grand course and Arthur Ashe. I want to be able to go and watch a match in that Arthur Ashe Stadium.
Yeah.
Feel thrilled about the match itself, and then come out, take a nice selfie in front of his statue. That is a big bucket list ticket item for me. Is the U.S. Open. Preferably, I would prefer the final. But really, as long as I can get in center court, Arthur Ashe Stadium, I'm good with any part of the U.S. Open. That's definitely a bucket list
being at like
for me.
Arthur Ashe, like week 1 or week 2 of the Open at night, where there's a women's match followed by a men's match, rather than just the final. I'm telling you, it's better. I've been to the Open, I don't know, 7 or 8 times. It's been several years since I've been there, and it's better to be there when you got all the activity going on at Louis Armstrong Stadium, the grandstand, all those outer courts. Because sometimes the best stuff you see are in the outer courts where it's not packed, and you've got still a decent sized name player playing in an early round match. That's always fun. All right.
I take your word for it. Now, aside from that, give me Maryland, Georgetown against anybody in the Garden. I'll take it out against each other.
Well, we're getting Maryland Georgetown
else.
this year at Capital One.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait. I can't wait. But I would love to see a game in the Garden. And if I pick a game, it has to be with either my two squads, either Maryland or Georgetown in the Garden.
Right.
I don't care who they're playing. I would love that. And then my last one would be the Rose Bowl, man. I've always wanted to take part in that grand scene that is, Americana to the fullest, the Rose Bowl. That's my three, buddy. Thanks for taking my call.
So I've been to the Rose Bowl for a Super Bowl. I've never been there for the Rose Bowl. I think I'd rather be there for the Rose Bowl. That's a good one, by the way, to be in Pasadena on January 1st for a Rose Bowl game. God, it's always so pretty on TV. Reggie, finish it up for us.
All right, Kevin. Now, again, you and I are probably the same age, but I'm talking about world heavyweight champion that's like a Mike Tyson. Yeah. I'm talking about the baddest man on the planet when it's undisputed. I need to be ringside. Like, that's on my bucket list. Or again, if we don't see like a Tyson, give me like Sugar Ray and Hearns. I was a kid, but I remember it was closed caption at the Cap Center.
Right. No, it was closed circuit. Yeah, closed circuit. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, they thought that Ray was going to get killed by Hearns, and he was losing. But again, I'm talking about heavyweight championship or one Hagler versus Leonard, like that type of.
Yeah, it was great. It was so good.
Yeah,
so good.
Yeah,
I mean, it was great going to the Cap Center and watching it on closed circuit. I saw that Hearns Leonard fight, the first one, at the Cap Center on closed circuit, and it was 19,000 plus watching it. It was insane. Thanks, Reggie. Appreciate it. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, something someone said about Brandon Ayuk that sounded kind of definite. We've heard from TJ Hushmanzada previously about Brandon Ayuk, a player that he has mentored, has been a personal coach for. TJ Hushmanzada was a wide receiver in the NFL for many, many years, most notably with the Cincinnati Bengals. He's got a podcast called The Speak Easy Show, and this was him either yesterday or earlier today with what he says is inside information on Brandon Ayuk.
I ain't gonna say this as a fact. He ain't going to the Commanders. Not Ayuk. It's done. It's over. Stick a fork in it. 0% chance. He ain't going. I want Stephon Diggs. I like Diggs. Do we got problems off the field? Yeah, I mean, he just like to mess with women all the time. That's okay. You just don't let it become a problem. But on the field, I'm taking him. BA, 0% chance that he's with the Commanders now. 0%. And the other day I was like, I ain't no more. I'm certain.
He's certain. And he went on to say, and it, quote, sucks because he's so young and talented, closed quote. I think that's been in this, long saga now with Brandon Ayuk is the thing that should be staring all of us straight in the face and saying, yeah, don't want him and they're not going to sign him. And that is the people closest to him have not supported him. The people closest to him or closest to what's going on, like Dante Whitner, a former 49er who's got a podcast. The other day, he said on his podcast, Brandon Ayuk's sealed his own fate. He'll never play another down in the NFL. You went at the 49ers front office and their coaching staff. You were very disgruntled, but the only chance you had was Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. That was the only person you had to go to battle for you. And for Brandon Ayuk not to understand that and go on social media and attack Jaden Daniels and his mom, you sealed your fate. So sometimes burning bridges is okay, but not in this instance. So I think that's the rest in peace for Brandon Ayuk's career. Steve Young said the other day, I worry for him. I want to reach out and help. This is beyond football. It feels like we need to not make this about football anymore, close quote. The people closest to the 49ers or to him, in the case of Hushmanzada, yeah. I mean, Dante Whitner didn't seem to think what some of you thought, which was this Jaden Daniels, Brandon Ayuk, shenanigans deal and in trolling people on social media. Yeah, to buy that was kind of silly. I did watch the first episode of Quarterback last night. I like it so far. The Flaccos are the stars of this show so far for me. Not surprising. He's such a good dude and people love him. And he's in Cleveland. He's just about to get traded to Cincinnati, which happened last year. And the best part of it, Max, was before his opener last year, or week 2 game in Baltimore, when he went back to Baltimore for the first time. He had not played in Baltimore since leaving Baltimore in 2019 or whatever year that was. And he's got 5 kids. And his oldest son and his wife are sitting in the crowd. And his oldest son says to his mother, basically, if he plays well, I'm going to crash out fantasy football-wise. And she said, what do you mean? And the son said, I didn't start him. I benched him. And then the wife says, I benched him too. That's pretty funny. The wife and the oldest son did not start the husband and father on their fantasy football team when he was a starting quarterback back in Baltimore. Probably the smart thing to do from a fantasy football standpoint. All right, that'll do it for today. Thanks to Mitch Tischler. Thanks to Max and Brian. I'll be back Monday with my World Cup final experience to share with all. Is Chris up next?
He sure is.
Welcome back, Rooster. Chris Russell next.